Take a breath. No, seriously. Stop scrolling for just a moment and take a real breath. Because what I'm about to tell you is something your body already knows, even if your mind hasn't caught up yet. There's someone out there who can't stop thinking about you. Someone whose heart races when you're near. Someone who replays your voice in their head long after you've walked away. And here's the part that makes your chest feel tight right now. You're not supposed to be together. That weight you feel, that's not anxiety. That's recognition. Your nervous system is picking up on something your conscious mind has been trying to rationalize away for weeks, maybe months. And if you've ever wondered why certain connections feel electric while others feel safe, you're about to understand the psychology behind it in a way most people never will. I need you to stay with me here, because what I'm going to explain isn't some romantic fairy tale. This is neuroscience. This is behavioral psychology. And this is the truth about forbidden attraction that no one talks about honestly, because honestly, it makes people uncomfortable. But discomfort is where growth lives. So let's go there together. The neurology of what you can't have. Here's something most people fundamentally misunderstand about human desire. The brain doesn't respond to love the way we think it does. When you experience attraction that's wrapped in restriction, when you feel drawn to someone you shouldn't want, your brain doesn't process that as romance. It processes it as obsession. Let me explain why. The human mind has a peculiar quirk. It interprets restriction as value. When something is easily accessible, abundant, and available without consequence, the brain categorizes it as low priority. But when something is forbidden, when it's dangerous, complicated, or off-limits, the brain does something remarkable. It magnifies it. What cannot be touched becomes larger than life. What cannot be claimed gets rehearsed endlessly in fantasy. And the person standing on the other side of that invisible boundary, they become more than human. They become symbolic. This isn't poetic interpretation. This is how your dopaminergic pathways actually function. Desire under restriction creates a neurological feedback loop. Every time you suppress the impulse to act, your brain releases a small burst of dopamine, not because you're satisfied, but because you're anticipating satisfaction. And anticipation, neurologically speaking, is more powerful than achievement. That's why forbidden attraction feels different from normal interest. It's not just stronger, it's structurally different. It's the emotional equivalent of holding your breath underwater. The longer you hold it, the more desperate the need becomes, until eventually the need for air eclipses everything else. Now you might be noticing certain things. Intense eye contact that lingers just a second too long. Conversations that feel emotionally intimate but always stop right before crossing an invisible line. Moments of silence that somehow feel louder than words. Physical proximity that charges the air between you, even when nothing is being said. That's not coincidence. That's restraint colliding with desire, and it's happening on both sides, whether you realize it or not. What most men never understand about female psychology. Here's where we need to get uncomfortable, because this is the truth that most men are never taught, and most women would never articulate out loud. When a woman feels something she believes she should not feel, her emotions don't just disappear. They don't fade quietly into the background. They concentrate. They compress. They become denser, heavier, more consuming. Your presence in her life stops being casual. You become symbolic. You're no longer just a man she finds attractive. You represent something far more complex. You represent escape. You represent risk. You represent a version of herself she rarely allows to exist. You become the embodiment of possibility in a life that may feel, on some level, predictable or constrained. And this is crucial to understand. That symbolic weight is why the energy feels different. That's why it feels heavier, more charged, more intense than what most people call chemistry. Because it's not just chemistry, it's projection, it's unmet need. It's the part of her psyche that's asking, what if I chose differently? What if I allowed myself to feel this fully? But here's the razor's edge you're walking on. That intensity is real, but it's also amplified by the barrier itself. It's not necessarily created by destiny or soulmate-level compatibility. It's created by restriction. When the mind cannot act, it imagines. When it imagines, It idealizes. And right now, you are being experienced not only as who you actually are, but as who you could be in a world without consequences. That version of you is powerful. It's intoxicating, but it's also incomplete. I'm not telling you this to diminish what you're feeling or to suggest that the connection isn't real. I'm telling you this so you don't confuse intensity with inevitability, so you don't mistake emotional charge for cosmic alignment. Forbidden attraction does not mean meant to be. It means emotionally unresolved. And if you don't understand that distinction, if you don't hold that truth clearly in your mind, you risk becoming attached to an illusion that feeds on silence, secrecy, and restraint. The two things this situation actually means, now we're getting to the core of it. And I need you to really hear this, because most men miss these two truths entirely, and they spend years, sometimes decades, trying to make sense of a dynamic they never fully understood. The first truth: the feelings are real, but amplified by the barrier. The emotions you're both experiencing are genuine. I'm not suggesting this is fake or manipulative or imaginary, but the intensity of those emotions is being magnified exponentially by the fact that you can't have each other freely. Think about it this way: when you're hungry and food is readily available, you eat and you're satisfied. But when you're hungry and food is visible but just out of reach, that hunger becomes all-consuming. It dominates your thoughts. It sharpens your senses. It becomes the only thing that matters. The same psychological principle applies here. The attraction between you isn't just attraction anymore. It's attraction plus scarcity, plus risk, plus the thrill of the forbidden. And those additional elements don't add to the feeling arithmetically. They multiply it exponentially. So yes, the feelings are real, but they exist in a pressure cooker, and pressure cookers distort perception. What you're feeling right now is a version of connection that's been intensified by circumstances, not clarified by them. That matters, because when or if those circumstances change, the intensity often diminishes. Not always, but often. And men who don't understand this walk into situations expecting the same emotional charge to continue indefinitely, only to be confused and hurt when reality doesn't match the fantasy. The second truth: this reveals psychological conflict, not just desire. This is the part that makes people uncomfortable, because it strips away the romance and exposes the machinery underneath. When a connection is forbidden, it doesn't just intensify desire. It exposes internal conflict, and conflict is where people reveal who they truly are. What you're experiencing isn't just mutual attraction between two people who happen to find each other compelling. What you're experiencing is a battle between impulse and identity happening inside another person's mind, with you at the emotional center of it. Let me break this down. When a woman feels drawn to you, but believes that acting on it would violate her values, her commitments, or her self-image, her psyche splits. One part of her moves toward you emotionally, seeking connection, intimacy, and possibility. The other part pulls away morally, protecting her sense of identity, her existing relationships, and her self-concept. This creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, the deeply uncomfortable feeling of holding two contradictory beliefs or desires simultaneously. And that dissonance manifests as hot and cold behavior. One day she's open, warm, fully present. She leans in. She shares vulnerability. She makes you feel like you're the only person in the world who truly sees her. The next day she's distant, controlled, even cold. She pulls back. She erects walls. She acts like the connection between you was all in your head. That inconsistency isn't manipulation by default. I know it feels that way sometimes, and occasionally it is manipulation. But more often, it's internal tension leaking outward. It's the evidence of a war being waged inside her nervous system, and you're just watching the casualties from the outside. Why that internal conflict doesn't resolve on its own. Here's the critical insight most men miss entirely. That tension doesn't heal itself. It doesn't gradually smooth out over time. It doesn't naturally evolve toward clarity or peace. It does one of two things. It either collapses inward into guilt, shame, and withdrawal, or it erupts outward into impulsive, often destructive action. And neither of those outcomes is gentle. Neither of those outcomes protects you. When people suppress desire long enough, it doesn't fade. It mutates. It transforms into obsession, resentment, or emotional dependency. This is why forbidden connections rarely stay quiet forever. They escalate, or they implode, but they rarely just resolve peacefully. You might feel like you're being tested right now, like if you just stay calm, patient, and understanding, everything will eventually make sense. Like if you give her enough space and time, she'll figure out what she wants and choose you consciously. That belief is comforting. I understand why it feels true. But it's also dangerous because while you're trying to interpret signals and decode mixed messages, her nervous system is trying to survive contradiction. And survival reactions aren't logical. They're emotional. They're primal. They're unpredictable. She may rationalize pulling away while simultaneously feeling pulled closer. She may convince herself that you're a problem simply because you awaken something in her that she doesn't want to confront. She may even start to resent you, not because you did anything wrong, but because your presence forces her to look at parts of herself she's been avoiding. The mistake most men make, and how to avoid it. This is where the vast majority of men derail completely. They personalize the push and pull. They assume they did something wrong. They think if they just say the right thing, behave the right way, or prove their worth more convincingly, everything will click into place. But here's the truth you need to internalize. This isn't about your worth. It's not about your effort. It's not even really about your compatibility, at least not yet. This is about what you represent, and what you represent is choice. Choice terrifies people who have built their entire lives around certainty, people whose identities are constructed on predictability, stability, and control. You are the embodiment of what if, and what if is the most dangerous question a person can ask themselves when they've already committed to a particular life path. So understand this clearly. Being desired in a forbidden way does not put you in a position of power. It puts you in a position of responsibility. How you respond will either stabilize the situation or intensify the chaos. If you chase, you increase the pressure. You make yourself into the pursuer and her into the pursued, and that dynamic alone can be enough to trigger retreat. If you withdraw completely, you leave her alone with unresolved emotion that may later resurface in unpredictable, sometimes destructive ways. The real strength here, the actual power move that most men never learn, is emotional containment. Knowing when attraction is real, but the timing is wrong. Knowing when connection exists, but clarity must come before action. And most importantly, knowing that not every intense bond is meant to be consumed. Some connections are meant to be understood, learned from, and then released. When someone studies you psychologically, now listen carefully, because this is where the dynamic becomes even more layered, and most men either grow emotionally here or repeat the same painful pattern for the rest of their lives. When someone is secretly intensely drawn to you but believes the connection is forbidden, they begin to study you, not casually, not playfully, psychologically. You become a reference point. Your tone, your timing, your reactions, your energy, all of it is observed, cataloged, and analyzed because her mind is trying to answer a question: is the risk you represent worth the cost? This is why you may feel unusually seen around this person. She remembers small details you mentioned weeks ago. She mirrors your emotional state without realizing it. She senses your shifts in mood before you even speak. That's not just romantic attentiveness. That's hyper-awareness. When desire is suppressed, attention sharpens. The brain becomes alert because it perceives danger and reward simultaneously. You are both the threat and the prize, and that duality keeps her nervous system in a state of heightened vigilance. But here's the truth no one tells you. That level of attention does not automatically mean readiness. In fact, it often means the opposite. It means she's gathering information to protect herself from her own feelings. She's asking herself questions you will never hear out loud. Would he change my life? Would I lose control? Would this destroy what I've built? Would I regret this? Is he worth the fallout? And while those questions circle endlessly in her mind, your presence becomes emotionally loaded. Every interaction is weighted. Every word carries subtext. Every glance means something. The trap of feeling special. This creates a subtle but powerful trap for you. You start to feel special, chosen, different from everyone else in her life. And you know what? You might be. But here's the critical distinction. Being desired is not the same as being chosen. Desire lives in emotion. Choice lives in action. And forbidden situations delay action indefinitely while inflaming emotion continuously. That imbalance is where men lose themselves. If you lean into the intensity without grounding yourself in reality, you become part of her internal conflict rather than a solution to it. You become another source of tension instead of a source of clarity. She may lean on you emotionally while denying you commitment. She may share vulnerability while withholding clarity. She may offer intimacy in private while maintaining distance in public. Not necessarily because she's cruel or manipulative, but because she's divided. And division always looks like inconsistency from the outside. This is where mentorship, real, honest, grounded mentorship, becomes essential. You must ask yourself a question that cuts through all the noise. Is this dynamic expanding my self-respect, or is it slowly eroding it? Is it adding peace to my life, or is it keeping me in a perpetual state of anticipation, uncertainty, and emotional limbo? Because emotional tension can feel alive, it can feel meaningful, it can even feel like love. But aliveness without direction eventually becomes exhaustion, and exhaustion without resolution becomes resentment. What a grounded man actually does. A grounded man, a man who understands himself, his value, and his boundaries, does not try to resolve someone else's internal war. He doesn't audition for permission to be chosen. He doesn't twist himself into shapes hoping to finally be enough. He stays present, but he stays centered. He allows space for clarity to emerge, knowing that clarity always favors those who do not abandon themselves in pursuit of someone else's approval. And here's the quiet power move that changes everything. When you stop feeding the tension and start embodying calm self-assurance, the truth surfaces. Either the connection moves into the open or it fades. Both outcomes protect you, because what is truly meant for you will not require you to live in emotional secrecy indefinitely. Real love, mature, conscious, sustainable love, doesn't thrive in shadows. It doesn't ask you to compromise your dignity while waiting for someone else to decide if you're worth the risk. It doesn't make you feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells, trying to be impressive enough or patient enough or understanding enough. Real connection, when the timing is right and both people are available, feels grounded. It feels reciprocal. It feels like coming home, not like standing outside in the rain, hoping someone will eventually open the door. The mirror, what this reveals about you. Here's the part that most men will never hear from anyone, and it's the most important insight in this entire conversation. Forbidden attraction is a mirror. It shows you the parts of yourself you've ignored, denied, or buried. When someone is intensely drawn to you but can't be with you, their intensity amplifies the shadows in your own psyche. The longing, the frustration, the obsession, they all reflect what you're willing or unwilling to confront within yourself. And until you recognize that, no amount of charm, effort, patience, or strategy will ever give you clarity. Think about it. Every racing heartbeat when she's near, every obsessive thought replaying conversations, every imagined scenario of what could happen if circumstances were different, those are all signals from your own emotional system, triggered by her energy but originating inside you. The forbidden element acts like a lens, focusing raw, unprocessed feelings until they become impossible to ignore. This is not a punishment, it's a revelation, and most men run from it. They chase her, they beg for signs, they try to rationalize what is inherently irrational. That's the fastest way to lose control and attract chaos instead of clarity. What desire actually is and isn't. Let me tell you something most men fundamentally misunderstand about desire. Attraction is never neutral, but it's also not destiny. Intense desire in a forbidden context is fueled by tension, mystery, and risk. It doesn't exist in a vacuum, and it doesn't automatically translate into long-term compatibility, emotional safety, or a functional relationship. Feeling wanted is intoxicating, but being wanted under restriction is like drinking a storm. It feels powerful in the moment, but it can drown you if you're not anchored. And here's the critical psychological truth. Forbidden desire will exaggerate traits you already have. If you're insecure, it amplifies doubt. If you're patient, it tests endurance. If you crave validation, it heightens obsession. The attraction itself is neutral. What it ignites inside you determines the outcome. That's why some men get lost in this dynamic, repeating the same mistakes in relationship after relationship, while others observe, learn, and emerge stronger. The difference isn't luck, it's discernment. The questions that separate boys from men. This is where discernment becomes your secret weapon. You need to ask yourself questions that are uncomfortable but essential. Am I engaging with this energy for insight, or am I simply feeding the thrill? Am I learning about myself, or am I giving my power away in exchange for fleeting attention? Am I pursuing this because it's genuinely aligned with my values and my life, or because the forbidden nature makes it feel more exciting than it actually is? The answers to these questions are uncomfortable. They strip away the romance and force you to look at your own motivations honestly. But they're also the only things that separate men who grow from men who suffer silently for years. Remember, forbidden desire is a teacher disguised as temptation. Respect it, watch it, learn from it, but do not lose yourself in it. Your clarity, your integrity, and your self-respect are currencies that cannot be borrowed, begged for, or stolen. They must be defended relentlessly, especially in moments when desire is screaming at you to compromise. The double-edged nature of intensity. Let's get even deeper, because most men fail to see the danger hidden inside forbidden attraction until it's far too late. When someone is obsessed with you but cannot be with you, the intensity is double-edged. On one side, it draws you in. It flatters you. It energizes you. It makes you feel alive in ways that normal, stable relationships rarely do. But on the other side, it can quietly erode your boundaries, manipulate your emotions, and tether you to a story that isn't actually yours to live. Here's the key insight. Intensity is not a guarantee of compatibility. Just because she can't stop thinking about you, just because her emotions flare wildly in your presence, doesn't mean she's emotionally available, ready to commit, or capable of building a healthy relationship with you. Forbidden attraction thrives on something I call emotional suspense. Every glance, every message, every fleeting moment of connection is designed, not consciously by her, but unconsciously by her nervous system, to heighten stakes, create longing, and amplify desire. And when you participate in that dynamic without awareness, you become a character in her inner conflict, not a man living his own life. The cycle that keeps men trapped. Most men respond to this dynamic in the worst possible way. They chase, they reassure, they try to fix the push and pull, and every time they do, they feed the cycle. When you chase, you validate the forbidden tension. You make it bigger. You give her mind more fuel to justify its resistance while secretly craving you more deeply. You become the evidence that this connection is dangerous, which paradoxically makes it more compelling. Here's what's subtle but absolutely critical. The forbidden dynamic thrives on imbalance. It needs one person who is emotionally unstable enough to lean in and one person who is enticed enough to lean back or push forward at the wrong times. Without that imbalance, the obsession loses its charge. Without that imbalance, the dynamic collapses into either conscious choice or natural dissolution. So what does a grounded man actually do in this situation? He observes without attachment. He notices the intensity without being seduced by it. He protects his boundaries, maintains perspective, and refuses to allow her internal conflict to hijack his emotional life. This is not rejection, it's not coldness, it's not playing games, it's discernment, it's clarity, it's knowing that desire alone is a spark, but commitment, stability, and mutual respect are the fire. What happens when you embody clarity? And here's what's profound. When you embody that clarity, when you stop chasing her story and start living your own, something remarkable happens. You no longer need her to choose you for your life to feel complete. You no longer interpret her distance as a reflection of your worth. You no longer obsess over whether she's thinking about you because you're too busy building something meaningful in your own world. And in that space, one of two things will occur. Either her obsession will stabilize into conscious choice, meaning she'll actually make a decision and take real action, or it will dissipate entirely. Either way, you emerge intact, respected, in control of your own life. That's the ultimate power. Not controlling her, not manipulating the dynamic, but mastering your own mind and emotions so completely that external chaos cannot destabilize you. Forbidden attraction is messy, it's intoxicating, it's powerful, but self-mastery is infinitely more seductive than any fleeting intensity. How this dynamic affects your nervous system. Let's talk about the subtle, almost invisible ways this forbidden intensity rewires you, because most men don't notice until years have passed and the damage is already done. Every time you engage with someone who is obsessed but unavailable, your nervous system gets triggered. Your dopamine spikes, your adrenaline surges, your emotional focus narrows until she becomes the only thing that feels real. That rush feels addictive because biologically, it is. The brain is wired to respond to uncertainty with craving. You think it's chemistry, you think it's fate, but it's biology. And biology doesn't care about your long-term happiness or your dignity. You might find yourself replaying conversations obsessively, analyzing text messages for hidden meaning, imagining scenarios where circumstances magically align and you finally get to be together. That's normal. But here's the critical point. Forbidden attraction thrives on your attention more than it thrives on any actual connection. The more you think about her, the bigger the energy becomes. The more you chase, the deeper the emotional spiral. And this is why so many men get trapped in a loop, mistaking obsession for love and illusion for reality. How this amplifies your strengths and weaknesses. Here's the hard truth that will either save you or destroy you. This type of connection magnifies both your strengths and your weaknesses exponentially. If you are self-aware, disciplined, and emotionally strong, you gain insight and clarity from this experience. You learn about desire, restraint, and the psychology of human connection in ways most people never will. But if you are insecure, reactive, or dependent on external validation, you lose yourself. And you may not even realize it until months or years have passed, and you look back wondering where your time and energy went. Forbidden intensity doesn't forgive weakness. It exposes it. It doesn't respect patience for the sake of patience. It tests it relentlessly, and it certainly doesn't honor entitlement. It punishes it. The path to mastery. But there is a path to mastery, and it starts with 3 fundamental shifts in perspective. First, acknowledge your own power in this dynamic. You are not just a passive target of her obsession, you are a participant. Your energy, your presence, your decisions, they all shape the emotional charge between you. Stop acting like things are happening to you and start recognizing that you are co-creating this experience. Second, recognize the difference between desire and decision. Desire can be chaotic, fleeting, and all-consuming. Decision is deliberate, grounded, and accountable. The man who aligns with decision over desire becomes untouchable by the emotional turbulence of forbidden attraction. Third, understand that the forbidden nature is the amplifier, not the foundation. The drama, the secrecy, the impossibility, they heighten feelings for both of you. But none of it guarantees a future. The moment you chase clarity without self-control, you hand over your power. The moment you prioritize your own emotional sovereignty, you either attract conscious choice or you escape unnecessary suffering. Both outcomes serve you, but only if you refuse to compromise your values, your boundaries, or your self-respect. Intensity is seductive, but clarity is priceless. So remember this because it's the core truth underneath everything we've talked about. Intensity is seductive, but clarity is priceless. The person who understands this doesn't get lost in obsession. They don't spend years pining after someone who won't choose them. They don't mistake emotional charge for genuine compatibility. They learn, they grow, and they emerge stronger, wiser, and more grounded than they were before. Forbidden desire is a storm, but storms don't last forever, and the wise man knows how to stand firm while they rage around him, trusting that when the winds finally die down, he'll still be standing exactly where he chose to be. The final truth: this is your story, not hers. Here's the final truth most men never grasp, and it's the one that changes everything once you truly internalize it. Forbidden attraction is not a story about her. It's a story about you, your choices, your boundaries, your emotional architecture, your willingness or unwillingness to build a life that doesn't revolve around someone else's indecision. The intensity, the longing, the obsession, they're all mirrors reflecting your own inner world back at you. They show you where your boundaries are weak, where your self-respect is negotiable, where your need for validation overrides your commitment to yourself. And if you fail to see that, if you keep externalizing the experience and blaming circumstances or her confusion or bad timing, you will become addicted to the tension instead of mastering it. Every pull, every hesitation, every secret glance, they're all opportunities to test your own clarity. Will you let yourself be consumed by desire, or will you stay anchored in awareness? Will you chase a version of connection that exists only in fantasy, or will you wait for reality to align with truth? This is where the men who grow separate from the men who suffer indefinitely. Growth comes from restraint. Growth comes from restraint, observation, and uncompromising self-respect. It comes from recognizing that not every intense feeling deserves to be acted upon. Not every powerful connection is meant to be consummated. And here's what most men miss entirely. Forbidden attraction can be a gift if you handle it wisely. It forces you to confront fear, control, and your own emotional triggers. It teaches patience, discernment, and how to separate intensity from intimacy. It shows you who you are when desire is screaming and wisdom is whispering. The connection may never become yours in the conventional sense. And that's the point. The gift isn't in the outcome. The gift is in the lesson. Your clarity is your power. Your clarity is your power. The more you maintain your emotional sovereignty, the more you refuse to compromise your peace for the sake of possibility, the more the truth will emerge. Either she will act consciously, making a choice that is real, grounded, and mutual, or the attraction will fade, freeing both of you from a cycle that could have consumed years of your life. Either outcome serves you, but only if you refuse to negotiate your values, your boundaries, or your self-respect. Only if you recognize that being desired is flattering, but being chosen consciously is what actually matters. The next time you feel that pull, so the next time you feel that magnetic pull, that heat of forbidden desire rising in your chest, pause, observe. Don't react, don't chase, don't collapse into the fantasy. Ask yourself, am I feeding a story that has no foundation, or am I standing in reality? Am I lost in her obsession, or am I grounded in my own life? Am I giving my power away, or am I honoring myself first? The answers are simple, but living them takes courage. Most men avoid this truth because it's uncomfortable, because it requires them to stop playing the victim and start owning their role, because it demands that they prioritize their peace over the thrill of being wanted. But the men who embrace this truth, they gain something most men never experience: an unshakable strength, a quiet confidence, a magnetism that comes not from trying to be desired, but from being so grounded in themselves that desire becomes irrelevant. The mark of a man who understands. Remember this, and let it sink all the way down into your bones. Intensity is a test, secrecy is a magnifier, and forbidden attraction is a mirror. The lesson is never about controlling her, winning her over, or proving your worth. The lesson is about mastering yourself, about knowing who you are when everything inside you is screaming to act, and choosing wisdom instead. When you can navigate the storm without losing your center, when you can feel the pull without being consumed by it, you step into a rare kind of power. Magnetic, self-assured, untouchable. That is the mark of a man who understands attraction, psychology, and himself in a way that no fantasy, no obsession, and no forbidden connection could ever teach. And that man? He doesn't chase storms. He doesn't get lost in intensity. He doesn't mistake emotional charge for destiny. He stands firm, he stays clear, and he builds a life so grounded in truth that nothing, no matter how intoxicating, can pull him away from himself. That's mastery, that's strength, and that's what forbidden attraction is here to teach you if you're willing to learn.